Okay, welcome back. We will move to our 6.71 p.m. item, consideration of Chapter 8 agreement, sale of tax defaulted properties with the City of Clear Lake, and we have our Treasurer Tax Collector, Patrick Sullivan. Come on up.
All right. Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. Patrick Sullivan, Treasurer Tax Collector. I'm here today to present for your consideration a Chapter 8 agreement sale with the City of Clear Lake. I've been working with the City of Clear Lake for the last several months, working with them to identify properties that could serve for economic development or housing needs within the city. And these are all tax defaulted properties otherwise eligible for tax sale. You'll note in the city's proposal, which I can put up if it's helpful, but do you want me to put that up on the board, or is everyone comfortable with the materials provided?
It's within the packet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
So you'll note in the proposal the City of Clear Lake issued, they suggested lower prices. I worked with City Manager Flora on this matter. Those lower prices are because the city is going to have to do certain amounts of work on some of these properties. A lot of them are going to require action by code enforcement or other cleanup needs. There can be weeds, abandoned vehicles. There's road work that has to be done in the area, and the city could speak more to that. But it seems clear that the City of Clear Lake is going to have to make an additional investment beyond simply purchasing these properties. So from my office's perspective, it's worth your board's consideration to review those proposed prices, and I would recommend accepting that lowered bid for them. Something to note with this agreement is that the actual price is not completely set here. After the board approves it, the city has to approve it, which I believe the city manager has been given authority to do. Once that's approved, it goes to the state controller's office. We can't actually initiate any further steps until the state controller gives their approval. To expedite that, one of the recommendations I've had in my association is that you generally do not want to alter the terms of the Chapter 8 agreement sale. The agreement sale is created through the state controller, through a committee process with county tax collectors and others. The advice I've been given is essentially if you modify the agreement, you tend to trigger a longer review. So the board is free to consider any other terms, but just be aware if we do alter anything, it is likely to lengthen that review from the state controller's office. Once that review is complete and we have their approval, we go through a noticing process that's pretty comparable to the regular tax sale that we do through an auction. We send out notices. If there are structures or residences, we may need to make contact. I don't believe that's applicable here. We'll publish. There's a few other ministerial steps we have to complete before there is an actual effective sale date. So the price you see here recommended is going to go up slightly because there's going to be increased interest. Probably it may be a few months before the sale actually has an effective date. And then there's also the cost. For instance, we have to pay for title research on each of these properties and notify the parties of interest. The city will have to pay that. So I anticipate the price you see here going up several $1,000s by the time all of those factors are in place. A few other things I would note, there is a below market sale in here, which are often the most challenged types of sales. They especially come up in bankruptcy for us. I think it's worth noting here the city has made contact with the property owner, and we actually have a letter in the packet that the property owner is aware of what we're doing here and is supportive of it. So while that is often an issue, in this case I don't believe it to be any concern. And then just the final point obviously is tax sales. They can be challenged under state law. They are often challenged in bankruptcy. There are difficulties after the sale's done sometimes with people getting title insurance and conventional financing if you're trying to flip it right away. But I have raised those points with the city, and I believe they're aware of it. So I don't have any further concerns on this sale. If the board has any questions, I'm happy to take them, and I know City Manager Flora is here as well if you have specific questions about Clear Lake's plan.
Sure. Do you want to come up?
Good afternoon, Chair Pye, School Board members, Alan Flores, City Manager, Clear Lake. Just want to make a couple brief comments and then happy to address any questions the board has. So first I want to thank Treasurer Tax Collector Sullivan. It's been a pleasure working with him over the last several months on this and a number of other issues in trying to kind of creatively problem solve some of the issues that result from the tax defaulted properties in the city of Clear Lake. This isn't really an ideal plan, not something that we're really wanting to do as much as we feel like this is one path forward to being able to solve some larger problems that are impacting the community in Clear Lake. So we're hopeful. So there's 24 properties here, and the goal, if the board sees fit to approve this agreement, it's approved by the state controller and so forth, would be to convert these vacant unused properties into a number of different things. Some of them we envision some single-family housing development. This is all of them struggle from continual kind of code enforcement issues that we like to get these properties into productive use and eliminate that sort of drain on our general fund. There's a few of these parcels that have had a number of illegal encampments, public safety issues, a number of fire starts over the years, and being able to address that. And then a couple of them also we have talked with the Conoctown Unified School District. They're near the school about the possibility of doing some school safety projects associated with some additional land that's nearby. So, again, we would wish that, folks would put their property into productive use and government didn't have to get involved, but we feel like on a few of these key properties, this is the best path forward at this time. And so, again, appreciate working with Mr. Sullivan, and our hope would be that if we kind of work through this and come back and deal with some of the paper subdivision lots and whatnot that are within the city, and this could be kind of a model moving forward. I don't know, the county hasn't done this type of thing for a number of years. I don't believe the city has ever purchased properties through the Chapter 8 option here. So anyway, just happy to address any questions the board has and ask for your support.
Okay, Supervisor Green.
Thank you. Just first run through this process for me, so I guess I kind of hung up on the public purpose. So the application does ask what a public purpose is, economic development and housing. But it's interesting because cities don't typically build houses themselves, so it might be a flip this lot and a subsequent offer to a housing developer. So my question, perhaps for Patrick first, is definition of public purpose and what limitations are based on that. And one reason I ask it, I didn't see any zoning on that. So if it's a series of subpar lots, it may end up getting flipped to some developer lucky enough to want to do R1s on them. That's cool, but it's a fairly broad public purpose that's stated in the application.
I believe I can speak to your question, Supervisor Green. It's different in a Chapter 8 sale when you're dealing with the city, for instance, another agency, because it's a much broader authority that's given. If it was a nonprofit coming before your board saying they wanted to purchase these properties to do affordable housing, I would actually have to attach deed restrictions and monitor their progress. I would have to keep tabs on it throughout the duration of that project. But when it's a city, there's a much broader array of issues that they can acquire property for. They're not limited to these tight and narrow categories. Nonprofits, there's open space, affordable housing. Like I said, I would actually have to record deed restrictions. Because it's a city, I don't really need to do that. As long as there's a broad public purpose and your board accepts that, my understanding is that's fine, although I'm kind of looking at Lloyd for this too.
Yeah, so the governing statute here is Revenue Taxation Code 3791, which is also cited in the documents, the part of the agenda packet. And essentially the requirement, the prerequisite would be if the property has been sold or attempted to be sold for taxes for 2 or more years, the governing body of the taxing agency may, as provided under that same article, make an agreement with your board in which the property is situated for purchase or an option to purchase. So that alone gives your board, under this specific arrangement, the discretion to approve such a sale or not. And that section right there does not reference specifically any public purpose requirement as opposed to other statutes for this type of proposed sale.
So there's a public purpose reference, but there's not a definition, a hard definition of it in that section of the Revenue and Taxation Code.
There is no public purpose reference on this code section that's being utilized.
Supervisor Spatier.
So I know that for the majority of these, except for the top 4 that are on the list, I helped with our previous tax collector to place it on the tax auction in hopes to get these properties more active and participatory in the communities. The top section, the Soderling, I know that myself, CC4C, and even some council members have all been out there to weed eat because it is a property that is absolutely a absentee landlord. Absentee property owner, and so I would say that to me, whether or not there's a statute, there is a public good to changing the level of activity that is occurring there, because the level of activity is a burden to the community it surrounds. And so I'm happy to see this come by. I know that we were able to put most of these on the tax sale, but the direct sale was a bit of a barrier for us to overcome, and really thank Tax Collector Sullivan to help push this through, and we're at the finish line here.
Okay. Any public comment? Anyone in the chambers or anyone in the Zoom room? I'm not in the Zoom room. Any hands up? Okay. Then I'll bring it back to the board for action.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the Chapter 8 agreement sale of tax defaulted properties with the city of Clear Lake.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you both for being.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next item, 6.8, 1:30 p.m., consideration of discussion regarding the state's draft emergency information order regulations for the Clear Lake watershed. And we have Director De Leon with us. I'll pass it over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, Board.
Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Scott De Leon. I'm Public Works and Water Resources Director. Marina Delagianis is on with me, and she has prepared a couple of slides for this presentation. We are bringing this item to you simply for discussion. There's no action to be taken, but if your board has any consensus and direction to staff, then following the discussion, then that could be appropriate. A couple of things to note for anyone who makes public comment to this. The public comment is really going to just go to this board, and any public comment that wants to go to the state, you're going to need to make that separately to the state. And Marina has a couple of slides, I believe, or at least one slide that talks about the upcoming public hearings for this with the state. Go ahead and switch your slide there, Marina, to the next one there. We brought this to you because this proposed regulation has the potential to be fairly impactful. It provides the state the ability to gather information from all water right holders or water users within the entire Clear Lake watershed. To include groundwater users, it has the potential to impact anyone who has littoral rights, groundwater, if they're using groundwater with a well, and it's not limited to anyone that's near a creek or spawning habitat for hitch. This is basically includes every parcel in the Clear Lake watershed. Though we've only provided the draft main regulation that has the requirement, there's some other regulations in there that, of course, allow the state to fine people if they don't comply. So the way I interpret that, they reference two separate items that you would be in violation of, and each has a $500 per day fine. So the way I interpret that is the maximum fine that the state could charge would be up to $1,000 a day for non-compliance. So it's significant. Again, this is a discussion item for your board. We provided some background about the proposed regulation with respect to its relationship to the governor's executive order. All of that was included in your memo and the packet that we submitted to the board. With that, I think that's going to conclude my introduction. And Marina and I are here if you have any specific questions. And there is the slide that has the orders, the draft orders. So you'll have them there in front of you for your discussion. With that, I will turn it back over to the board and be happy to try to answer any questions.
Supervisor Spatier?
So I'll ask my question, and then I'll provide my feedback on direction that I think we should look at. Clear Lake watershed, it's defined in the definitions as something that doesn't quite match what my definition would be. Does this preclude any other creek outside of what it speaks to, the Middle Creek, the Scotts Creek, Kelsey Creek? It seems to be more on the north and west, a little bit on the south as well, but nothing on the east side.
Well,
just wondering if it's and everything else, or did it not list everything, or is it specific to those areas?
well, in the slide that's in front of you there's there is a definition for Clear Lake watershed, and it appears to be Middle Creek, Scotts Creek. It appears to be the west side of Clear Lake, and would appear to be to coincide with the creeks and streams and tributaries that are historically used by the Hitch for their run. So there is a bit of a conflict there, because the Clear Lake watershed, in our definition, is a much larger region, and so perhaps that's one of the things that could be better defined is exactly the area that these regulations would apply to.
Yeah, and then it gets more confusing on the fact that it lists all these creeks, but yet also anyone using groundwater away from those creeks, what exactly is the distance? It doesn't seem to identify that. And so I have great concerns on what this impact, not just to those who would have to meet this new standard or meet the guidelines of this executive order, whether it's for commercial purposes or residential purposes or whatever, even our public utility systems. I'm just greatly concerned as to what that does and what we're asking for. And so because of my concern, I'm going to say that something was offered for me to do from this board, and it feels like it's working, and I'd like to offer the same situation. We brought here the concerns of the California Department of Public Health's decision on the syringe exchange program. The board denied moving forward with a letter directly to them, but to engage in conversation, and we are engaged in conversation, and they are responding, and we have another meeting set up, and it feels like we're being heard. And I'd love to do the same thing as send a delegate from here, a group from here to speak with, I don't know if this is directly from Fish and Wildlife, or if it's the Water Board, or if it's a mixture of everybody that we need to speak with, but to have those conversations to help define and better understand what the impacts are, and to see if we can mitigate the what appears to be the largeness of the impact at this moment in time, if we can bring it back to a remote location of those creeks versus such a broad term of watershed. So that would be my suggestion, is we engage in conversation and see what we can do to mitigate the scope of this order.
So add the workshops that are next month.
I think the workshops are not meant for that type of engagement. I think staff and supervisors engage directly with their staff. Once you start mixing in the public, they have their own agenda, not the public, but the water board will have their own agenda, and they're not going to be able to really sit us down and have a conversation with us to understand our needs and our concerns in comparison to a private conversation.
Can I chime in real quick?
Yes.
Yeah, Marina Delajanis, Deputy Water Resources Director. So going off of the comment made by Supervisor Sabatier, we did get an email this past week from the Water Board. This is their regulations that they have drafted up for compliance. So they have invited us to engage, provide any comments, but we would need to submit a formal public comment. I don't think that you can submit too many comments, so definitely hear what you have to say, Supervisor Sabatier, as it relates to having these conversations prior to, but just to reiterate, public comments are to be submitted via the formal process, which I have the slide here on, which we will be submitting via the October 19th board meeting, or excuse me, the water board meeting, which is in person, and then they have another formal public workshop to solicit these public comments via Zoom on Tuesday, October 24th. They will also take in any public comments in writing that you can send, and I have additional information. You can email that to them, and that public comment period closes on October 31st. So I don't think that we can reiterate and have these conversations enough. So just wanted to provide that additional information.
Okay. So it sounds like we're not going to be able to have those meetings, those conversations before the public comment period, but we can try.
We could try. Again, the State Water Board did reach out to my department, and they did share that they are interested in having these conversations prior to.
Okay.
So what they can modify, I'm not quite sure, but they did reach out to us, and they wanted to specifically hear any comments or questions that our department, the Watershed Protection District, has.
Okay. Supervisor Green?
Yeah, thank you. I hear a couple opportunities for the county itself to offer comment. One would be we would have certain facilities or wells that we leverage. So the Watershed Protection District and the county as a whole, maybe special districts, may have some very site-specific or facility-specific concerns and about how this may impact them. For example, I know the city of Lakeport presumably would be subject to this because of their groundwater well at Green Ranch. But to the original thing about the scope of this, yeah, I believe it is purposefully broad in its scope and intent to cover the entire county as through evidenced in those watershed definitions. And I want to acknowledge that the draft regulations as they are presented here today are not self-explanatory, not real self-evident what the end game is there, but I believe if we're to summarize what we know and what we've learned in this long year of learning about the Clear Lake Hitch emergency is we don't know what we don't know. And so the first step the state water boards took was earlier this year when they focused on the riparian rights and surface water diversions and making sure that we had all the data coming out of the county that needed to be collected. And for those that were familiar with that process or heard about that process from a neighbor, it wasn't the most fun thing to get a notice from the state water boards, including the notice of potential fines and what have you. But at the end of the day, I think most of those people that received those letters found it very easy to engage with the state water boards, work out ways to figure out reporting mechanisms. And, it may have been something that had never been asked of those people before, even though they were subject to the reporting requirements, and it may not have been, to be honest, a priority for the state water boards before that, because they were on the hook to collect that data, and we weren't exactly banging down the door saying, where's that data? So it's been a learning curve as far as the first steps of the state water boards into this subject. What's before us today, I think, is a very reasonable disclosure that if they are to take meaningful steps to address the Clear Lake Hitch emergency and also the standing drought emergency order, the executive order that still stands, they need data, and we don't have it. It'd be really hard to task Department of Fish and Wildlife with calculating in-stream flows sufficient to protect the public trust and to protect hitch migration and spawning without really understanding the interplay between our groundwater and our surface water bodies. And on top of that, we also have a standing groundwater sustainability plan area in Big Valley. Same thing, at the end of the day, that agency is supposed to provide some type of knowledge and monitoring and oversight, and occasionally may want to execute some management actions just to make sure we're managing the resource appropriately. We couldn't even begin to explore how to do that effectively without having a much better real-time picture of where our groundwater supplies are and where they might be bleeding off from time to time in real time. So, I totally get if people are concerned in seeing this, but that's why we have public scoping sessions. That's why the state water boards, they are going to come here to Lakeport and do a listening session in person. They are going to do that Zoom session, and they're going to take all those comments together, and if there is some valid reason to limit the scope of this somehow, okay, let's talk about it. I talked in a previous item about possible public trust areas and stuff like that that may be an area of focus. But at this stage in the game, what they're doing with this information order is basically saying, we do have a crisis here in Lake County. We do have marching orders through the executive order and through the heartfelt request of the Lake County community to do something meaningful. And that meaningful next step that they have identified, I fully support. We need to understand much better where our wells are, what wells we don't know about, and I don't think it's going to be universal water meters for everybody, but I do think there are going to be opportunities, especially for larger well installations, to put in well monitoring equipment, to take a voluntary action so we can start building this database of well locations and well levels that will be useful to these future discussions that we need to have to figure out next steps for stream flows and fish. And that's about it. Thank you.
Anyone else before I open it up for public comment?
Just a final comment, and it is so a complicated issue. Obviously, in reading through all the materials here, I agree with the public comment opportunities we're going to have, and any other conversation that can happen between now and then. I agree with defining the areas. I did read it too, to Scott's Creek, all the creeks that were on there, really look at the hitch conversation that we've been having. But some of this reporting shouldn't surprise people. If you have a water rights number, whether you're water diversion or water rights, you should be filling those out every year anyway right now. That's how you keep your license on a yearly basis. I know that because I currently do that. You can do it online. There are other ways that you can do it, but if you're diverting water, putting it in ponds, using it for irrigation or any other diversions, if you have a standing license, you need to be reporting that on a yearly basis. So it sounded like they weren't going to do anything redundantly. There may be some other stuff. Now, obviously, the well conversation is something new. But at a county level, anyway, we know our neighbors in Sonoma, I think, implemented something for wells. So it is coming. So I think getting the definitions and stuff that we need to do are very important. But understanding that even in South County, where we're not a part of the Clear Lake, watershed, there is a cry from the community of understanding our aquifer a lot more that we are living off of down there. So I think these conversations are coming, down the road anyway. So I think refining those definitions and other stuff are important. But participation is going to be just as important as anything else. So I would agree with any side conversations that water resources may have to come up with. My thoughts are, being that it's on this side of the lake, it would be, Jessica and Mike, but that's up for the board to decide. But Jessica, I know you work on a lot of different things too, so.
And I think we'll open it up to the public. I think we've got a lot of comments, potentially, some people in the chamber. So if you want to come up and state your name and give your 3 minutes.
Hi guys, it's Rebecca Harper with Lake County Farm Bureau. As this is, primarily just a discussion and an informational item, I'd just like to share some information for you as how the draft emergency regulations pertain to agriculture and the context around that, just so, if it helps at all. Anyways, so essentially what the draft emergency regulations do is outline the authority for the State Water Resources Control Board to issue an information order. So we had talked kind of about this information order concept when we started really discussing and focusing on the Clear Lake Hitch emergency. So that's essentially what these draft regulations do with regard to ag. So I think, we could expect sometime in the near future for there to be an information order issued, specifically to gauge some more information on groundwater wells and what their usage is in the Big Valley Basin and in the Clear Lake watershed as well. So just as some backstory to kind of everything that's been going on. There is an agricultural stakeholder group that's been working directly with the State Water Board and helping to provide them with feedback on the draft emergency regulations and some other processes as we go along, just as there's other working groups working with them as well. And so something that I hope we will see in the draft emergency regulations and in the information order is a mechanism for alternative compliance. It's something that we've been working on. But if there are those landowners who have been willing and cooperative to provide information so far, we'd really like to see that they have the opportunity to do so and continue to work in cooperation outside of an information order, whereas that information order might pertain to individuals who are not so willing. So that's something that we're working on. It's something you might expect to see more of, but I just wanted to give you that information for what it's worth and let you have that as background as well. So if there's any questions about that too. Awesome.
Questions about that? No. Okay.
You got your thinking face on, Bruno.
Always.
I can tell.
No question, just thank you. The Farm Bureau has been up front in this whole process, and I think to the extent concerns have been raised, Farm Bureau has been front and center in addressing them head on, and the Ag Group too. So I appreciate all the hard work, and I'm confident in the months past that we're going to get through these future months just fine.
Yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on up.
Come on, Joe.
I'm Joan Moss. I was the public comment person for the Groundwater Sustainability Project under Denise or Michelle, and they were kind enough to write all of my public comments down for me. Just recently, a friend of mine shared that he understands that there was an airplane surveying everything in Lake County, and he had built a pond at a Lake County Supervisor's verbal permission 35 years ago. And he was being assessed for that pond, that he didn't have a permit. And he's one of the problems that the Farm Bureau woman is going to come across, because he had verbal permission to build it, and it's been 35 years. The vineyard right next to him has gotten their water development permitted because they were just recently built, and they're recently permitted. But is it fair to make a 35-year-old pond that this fellow thought that he had permission to build pay a permit fee? Something like that. we have problems. I'm not going to say his name. I don't have permission to say his name. But it's going to happen all over our county, and we need to work together to try to solve it. That's not what I'm saying. And I'd be glad to share what Kelly was nice enough to produce. I have it produced, and I'll give it to whoever wants a copy. It's not exactly, it's what I do. I am an investigative reporter. Sometimes we clash, but I do try to give the facts. So this is happening, and I think we need to share and communicate and try to work together. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone in the Zoom room? I don't have it open. Do we have hands up in the Zoom room?
There are no hands raised in the Zoom room at this time.
Okay, then I will close public comment. Supervisor Sabatier?
Well, now that I learned I can give verbal approval of things, I had no idea. I'm not looking to negate what is in front of us, but if we're going to be asking people to do things with the threat of a fine, I want to make sure that it's right what we're doing and fair what we're asking people to do, because it's not voluntary, it's being forced with a threat of action if you don't comply. And so I think having a conversation to better understand what their definitions are, what the scope of this is, I think is not a bad thing for us to approach the water board with, to continue the conversation and better understand what their final aim is. And I would love to see us sending a group with our water resource team to have those conversations.
Supervisor Green?
Yeah, again, I think the track record shows. Again, when we were talking about the surface water diversion, several people got notices, and at first glance are kind of scary. I've already given feedback during that process that I understand why their notices are written the way they are. They're legal documents, and they're advising people of information and how to, how to get in touch with the water board and stuff like that. A nice cover letter goes a long way, maybe a nice envelope too, but that type of feedback has already been given. But to the extent we're going to interject ourselves in what is really a state process, we can certainly give feedback as it pertains to our facilities. If we can echo some of the concerns that are raised by some of the people in our community, we'll certainly amplify those voices. But this is their process, so we're going to participate, we're going to comment on it, but we're not going to drive it. And I just want to be clear about that.
So if I can argue that, yes, it's their process, but we requested for them to create this process. We literally asked for the water board to come help us with the hitch. That gives all the cards to the state. Again, not saying negate, but let's check in before we start asking our people to participate in something that we're not fully aware exactly what they're being asked to participate in. The impacts could be small or the impacts could be large, and being at the table allows us to at least understand and prepare and possibly see if we can minimize the scope so that it actually is the right scope to work with. I think we know what our people can and can't do much more than the state can. And rather than saying the ship has sailed, no, I think that's what we're here for, is to protect our people from things that are unnecessary to ask of them. Again, not negating what's being asked to do, but we need to be at the table with them to help them make sure that they don't do something that's an overreach.
Were you going to say something?
No, I kind of said what I had to say. Obviously we did the Clear Lake Hitch emergency. This all derives from those conversations and what this board made. That was a 5-0 vote from what I remember. I really appreciated the Farm Bureau getting up here and talking about what's going on. When I read through the notices, it didn't say shall be fined, it said may, and through the conversations, and obviously we know that is a slippery slope, but I just appreciate all the conversations that have been had. From the Farm Bureau and the agricultural industry, I saw a list of preemptive opportunities to help with the flow this last year. It was like a 10 or 15-page suggestion on what they were doing. So I think the conversations are happening with the industry. I understand with the new thing with the wells, but the reality of that is it's coming. We need to be prepared for that down. May not be in the next 5 years, but it might be in the next 10 for sure. So understanding that. So I think they've given us a process to go through, but if Water Resources wants to make some comments to really kind of divine things, I'm definitely in favor of that.
Yeah, I'm in favor of putting together a delegation. We're not really putting together an ad hoc committee. Can't really do that today, but the timeline is short, and it's the first meeting is on the 19th of October.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would hope that we could meet with them before that, but I will say that the next couple weeks of my schedule are very, very tight, and so would you like to do this? Because I don't think that I can get something on the calendar.
I can try. Obviously, it would have to work with everyone's calendar, and so it all depends on exactly when. I'm sure it'll be via Zoom or virtual, as it usually is with the state. So I'd be happy to make that happen.
With Supervisor Green? Okay. And so try and get that meeting done in the next 2 weeks if possible, so that you can come back to the board before the comment period, which will begin on the 19th, so.
And we don't meet after the meeting of the 3rd, so at the earliest, maybe we'd be back on the 17th to share with the board.
Yeah, if we could meet so if we could bring that back to the board on the 17th, have a group conversation after what you all have given feedback and learned and tried to understand more of what's being asked. I think that's the most appropriate thing that we can do right now. Supervisor Green, did you have something else?
My only question is I do want to check with Water Resources.
It'll be with.
They have some staffing issues too, so I want to make sure they have bandwidth to accommodate our needs on that.
Yeah, I think that was offered up, but
Yes.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, it'll be Water Resources staff, the two of you. Not sure if we want to also add special districts in ag.
I think right now, we're looking for more information and better understanding, and we can share that with the others.
Okay.
And then when it's a point where maybe we want to share our concerns, then that would be a different conversation as well. Because right now, I think we need to better understand before we formulate concerns. That would be my opinion.
And a couple other thoughts. And again, it is short notice, kind of, but not incredibly short. So if there's interest from Ag Advisory, we could kick it there, get feedback. Scotts Valley Advisory Council, I met them with last night. I shared the regs with them again. There may be some regional concerns that come up. Big Valley GSP people may have different concerns. So certainly we'll spin up what we can do, but we do have Ag Advisory, we have Fish and Wildlife may want to give input. So there's any number of communities of interest that may want to kick the tires on this. So we'll certainly we won't call it an ad hoc, but we'll call it a working group or whatever. But there's plenty of other organizations that may want to give input. You may want to take it to your guys' max and get some input. So.
Well, I think we need to have the meeting with the water board with a small delegation first, and then come back to the board. There's a lot of other organizations and committees that can also submit comment during these two workshops, but I do agree that we should probably keep it a little tighter initially to have that intimate conversation.
I think it would be a good start.
Yeah. Okay, so I think you'll all be able to schedule something preferably in the next couple of weeks so that we can come back here on the 17th.
The four of us will communicate.
Oh, sorry, I thought you had something to add. Okay. Well, if there's nothing further, I think that was just consensus and information.
Chair Pyska, just maybe one final reminder, the in-person participation meeting with the state, in your board packet, it lists the time as 2 o'clock on Thursday, October 19th. That has been revised by the state to 5:30. So just for members of the public who are interested in participating in that, it's 5:30 on Thursday, October 19th.
Here in the chambers. Yep. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for that item. Our next 7.3.
I was just going to say, I was just going to help you out, 7.3.
Yeah, 7.3, consideration of response to the 2022-23 Lake County Civil Grand Jury Final Report. This is brought to us by our admin office, and it looks like we have our Deputy CAO, Matthew Rothstein.
Good afternoon. It's a privilege to address your board this afternoon. I am Matthew Rothstein, Deputy County Administrative Officer. Each year, the Lake County Civil Grand Jury's final report documents findings and recommendations of their investigations. And in recent years, your board has been invited to respond to specified recommendations. You will have seen the draft response attached to today's agenda, prepared pursuant to Penal Code Sections 933 and 933.05. And draft responses included information provided by elected and appointed department heads, and we're very grateful to all who took time to review the reports and contribute. For your awareness, your board's final response must be submitted to Judge Markham no later than Tuesday, October 10th, and copies of the departmental responses will be included with your board's submittal. A typographical error was corrected in the Administrative Office's departmental response. The corrected version is now attached to today's agenda and publicly available. And staff recommends your board approve the 2022-23 grand jury response. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Supervisor Sabatier.
And the only changes to the administration one was just the dates?
Yes.
Okay. There was something, I'll just express it, but I can go either way. The responses that we have here, not specific to our sheriff's response, but our overall Board of Supervisor response that summarizes all of the responses. So for example, underneath the sex trafficking hiding in plain sight, the note says no response was required or requested of the Board of Supervisors. Our board encourages readers to review the response of Lake County Sheriff Rob Howe, which indicates this recommendation has been implemented. And it says the same thing underneath America's Bleeding School Shootings. And the way that I read it is, it sounds like the recommendation has been implemented based off of the recommendation that was provided to us, but it has already been implemented prior to the investigation, and I kind of wish that it says that, so that on the record, this was not an issue that we resolved, this was never an issue. And it's, the way I read it is, it was an issue that we have resolved. And again, I can go either way, because I know where we are and I know where we stand, but in writing, it reads differently, in my opinion, compared to what the truth is. So, wanted to see what the board thought of that, and either way, I'm willing to move forward.
I noticed that too, and maybe going forward, we could word it a little differently next year, that, you know, it's, I agree with that. Anyone else?
Yeah, can we make that change today? I'm in agreement with that change.
Yes, your board can make changes to the report as presented, and as far as approval, your board has the discretion to approve it as amended with those changes, if your board so chooses.
Now, I will say, I know that it's part of post-training, but I don't know the initial time that that post-training was required. Was it 6 months ago when this started? But the way that it was worded, it's already been part of the process. So I don't know if we have enough from the sheriff to say 100% prior to the investigation. Is there a better term to use? Okay, you're okay. Then I would like to move forward with adding the words prior to this grand jury investigation to those two items of the note under sex trafficking and America's Bleeding.
Okay, any public comment? Okay, come on up.
Joan Moss, my photographs of the hitch were very moving to me, and I studied this report very carefully. On page 212, there is effect on the hitch. I'd like to read this into the record. This is by the grand jury members. Over the last 6 years, the number of hitch has declined significantly, and now many local agencies consider it to be an endangered species. Recently, an emergency was declared by the Board of Supervisors regarding the status of the hitch. Part of the reason for the decline of the hitch is the pollution of the waters of Clear Lake from chemicals such as cyanotoxins. These chemicals, commonly referred to as blue-green algae, are particularly harmful to adults, children, animals, and fish. Runoffs from agricultural properties and cannabis farms contain insecticides and fertilizers. These are meant to control insects, but affect the health of crops, the hitch, and the lake. That's page 2012 of the grand jury report. And this is doing what we find it hard to do here in Lake County Supervisors, is connect subjects to subjects. The hitch don't have any choice of what they breathe with. Okay? They breathe using all these cyanotoxins and poisons. So I think that should be in the record. And I am just a citizen. I am not a member of the grand jury. But I did put this in an article, and I will send it to you. Thank you. It's called Froth Monsters. You're going to love it. But this is in the grand jury report. My story is about the geothermal solids and wastes that have gotten into our water. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the Zoom room? Okay, then I will bring it back to the board for action.
Move to approve the response to the 2022-23 Lake County Civil Grand Jury Final Report.
As amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. 7.4, consideration of presentation on broadband initiatives. This is from our administration office. Thank you, Matthew. And we've got our Deputy CAO, Ben Rinkelman. Welcome, Ben.
That was close.
It's internal.
Has that USB been approved?
Came from administration here.
What
That's what I was
happened
told to do.
when the walk across the lobby?
It wasn't on the park bench outside.
Should I be over there then to click?
I think if you want to see what you're doing.
Yes.
Okay. Just advice. Maybe you already
Ta-da. Thank you. Good afternoon, Board. Ben Rickelman, Deputy County Administrative Officer. I also have Dick Nielsen, who is a Senior Engineer with CBG Communications. CBG is our broadband consultant for our updated master broadband plan, and will also be working on the implementation plan.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us, Dick. I'm going to go over a few slides, and then CBG will go in depth on the master plan. Overall, the reason I'm here is there's a lot happening in the broadband space. There's a lot of moving money in the state budget. The federal funding account, which is the $28.4 million allocated for last mile wireline broadband infrastructure in Lake County. The applications are due at the end of this week, so we should see some movement on that. I haven't got an exact date from the CPUC when they're going to choose the projects, but I'm guessing 4 to 6 months we might hear something. There is a state fund, the California Advanced Services Fund. This is funded through a surcharge on the telecommunication companies here in California. So it's not as expansive of funding as the federal programs, but it has much more flexibility, and it has some interesting parameters that could be really useful for Lake County. The middle mile broadband network, there's been some funding changes, and that's in development where the state of California is going to go with that. So I can provide a bit more detail there. Then there's BEAD. I know there's several different buckets here, so feel free to ask questions in the acronyms soup of broadband. So the state of California a few months ago was allocated about $1.86 billion through this. This was funded through the federal infrastructure bill. What happens with it is still to be determined. The CPUC said they were going to issue guidance next month, October. So the county might be providing comment. And then final guidance should come out in December. So we're anticipating deployment of BEAD funds in 2024. So the state budget and broadband. So back in 2021, there was SB 156 passed, about $6 billion in broadband funding, a mixture of general fund, and then there was broadband funding in the CARES Act, ARPA, and the infrastructure bill. As you're well aware, the California state budget goes up and down a bunch. So this year was a down year, so that meant certain things had to be pushed back or removed, and one of them was portions of the broadband program, specifically last mile and the loan loss reserve. The governor's budget on the right, and this comes from a report from the legislative analyst's office. I can send that out. It's a good overview. It's about 15 pages of kind of what's changed. But the two major programs that have been impacted is the loan loss reserve and the last mile. Those are what they're mapping out for future fiscal years, but that, of course, is not a guarantee. That is just what the governor's office is projecting. So we'll see what happens in this upcoming budget year.
So I have a quick question about that, and I kind of wanted to bring it up for Supervisor Simon as well, actually, and Supervisor Crandall. I know Caltrans has a rule that when they redo highways, that they're supposed to trench out for broadband alongside the highways. But for Highway 29, if I remember correctly from our APC meeting, Supervisor Simon, they said that they have a separate utility corridor that's outside of the highway, so they weren't going to implement broadband there. And so it's just something that, as I see that middle mile is starting to scale back, we need to just really push, no, you will put broadband if you're working on this highway, and not get a different story of, don't worry, it'll be on this corridor over here, so we got a exemption for the project. And so I know that that happened for the Highway 29 corridor, Canocti corridor that was just finished, or at least Part A. Just something to keep in mind, that I feel like the backscaling of the middle mile is hurting us twice as much because we also lost it out on Highway 29.
Completely agree, and try to bring it up every time. If they're going to be doing the projects in Lake County, they need to be getting that infrastructure in the ground now. So I completely agree.
Agree too. It's something we are going to keep on top with Caltran and CPUC. I will say I'm jumping a little around in the presentation,
Sorry.
but no, it's a good question. So with the middle mile, there's now this phase 1 and phase 2. The state might be moving on from that also, but let's stick with the phase 1 and phase 2. That portion of 29 is still in the phase 1 in the funded portion, and all the middle mile in Lake County is going to be built. There's nothing existing for them to lease. So I anticipate construction starting probably in 2024, no matter what on that section. I would also add just that the amount in the revised broadband budget is about $500 million more. But again, that is future fiscal years, so we'll see what happens. So the federal funding account, so just to recap again, this was an allocation for each county, so it's guaranteed for that county. For Lake County, it's about $28.4 million. They have pretty stringent requirements. It's got to be wireline, so no fixed wireless, which is difficult for a lot of sections of Lake County due to our topography. There's about a 9,300 cap per household for ministerial review. Projects can go above it, but then the whole CPUC board commission has to approve those projects. And they have a really high service requirement, 100 megabytes down, 100 megabytes up. A lot of federal programs and state programs are more in the 120 range. So the initial submissions are due the end of this week. We're cognizant of two for Lake County. One of them is the RCRC open access fiber. So this would build off the middle mile. It would enable several different ISPs to offer service off of this. So there's a company they're working with has a network in suburban Salt Lake, and if you're in the neighborhood they have, you can choose from several different plans. So I don't know how much new households it will provide high quality broadband to. I think what the major benefit, at least the initial phase, will be pricing, which I know is a major issue in Lake County. So it could really drive down the cost of your monthly broadband bill. They're mostly proposing around the lake. There's a bit in Cobb and also outside of Kelseyville. We also have a large ISP that provides primarily residential service here, and they have mostly proposed providing service to unserved areas. RCRC's proposal is about 4 times as big as the ISP's, and kind of the total between the two is significantly over the 28 million. So it'll be interesting to see what the CPUC decides to do. They have a pretty complicated scoring metric. You can find it on their site. We did send letters of support for both projects. So we should know, the CPUC won't give me a time frame when they're going to make a decision, but my guess is in 5 to 6 months. If they don't allocate all 28 million, there might be another FFA funding round, which would be in the beginning of 2024. So as I mentioned before, this is a state program. You can use fixed wireless for this, so it actually has been a lot of fixed wireless proposals. The advantage of fixed wireless, especially for Lake County, is for hilly topography, it's just much more affordable to put the infrastructure in. So we have North Coast Networks and Digital Path have both proposed fixed wireless projects for Lake County. They would serve a good amount of unserved and underserved households, so it'd be great if they were approved. But again, there's the funding issue. The state said there was about 10 times as many proposals as there is available funding this year. The upside is because it's a recurring surcharge, it's not a one-time pot of money. So even if we're unsuccessful in future years, there could be possible CASF projects. And these are available on the CPUC's websites. These are the proposed CASF fixed wireless projects. They're required to provide a service of 100 up, 100 down, 20 up, and they have an affordability requirement for a few years. The FFA also has an affordability requirement for a few years also.
Quick question on that map on the left, just because I love polygons, but
Sure.
that appears to be increasing coverage for my sailboat, but not any land on Buckingham Peninsula. Should that be overshadowed, Buckingham Peninsula, within that polygon?
Yeah, I asked Digital Path why they included polygons over the lake, and his answer was, well, because of the nature of fixed wireless, you would get service there if you're on the lake, and I don't think that's going to do much for the CPUC, but they put it in there.
So those areas, the lake would be served, but
Correct.
residents on Buckingham Peninsula itself would not be, as shown in that?
So their proposed location for the equipment is on Buckingham Peak, where the tower is. They would just attach more fixed wireless equipment. Because you need eyesight for the fixed wireless, because of the kind of the slope of Canocti and the trees, it's not gonna, there's not gonna be that line of communication for a lot of households on Buckingham Peninsula. So this is definitely a piece of legislation that's,
John, if I could jump in, I was on mute. I was trying to add on that last slide. If you look at if you can go back one. If you look at the one on the right, the peninsula is covered by North Coast networks. Is that?
It may just be a visual artifact, I don't know. Thank you.
yeah, you're correct, Dick. So the fixed wireless signal is coming from another point, so it's going to hit the peninsula there, whereas the one that's on Buckingham Peak is not.
And these two providers, if you look at all of the maps, these two providers, if they both got all the funding they're asking for, would pretty much cover the, not just the shoreline, but it would go all the way around the lake and inland a little bit, which of course is where a lot of the population resides. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ben.
No problem. Appreciate it. So the middle mile network, original proposal is going to be a little over 10,000 miles. The state realized, I mean, some of it isn't their fault. So the price of telecommunication equipment during the pandemic increased a lot. And so they currently do not have the budget for the entire 10,000 plus network. So they came out about 2 months ago with this phase 1 and unfunded phase 2. The phase 1 is about a little over 8,000 miles. So in the dark orange is the phase 1, and then in the purple is the phase 2. About 3 weeks ago, the state removed this map from their website, the Department of Technology, which is overseeing this. I've heard there's a significant pushback both in rural and urban California. It was not necessarily the most equitable way they decided these two categories. There's indications that the governor is going to include funding for phase 2 in next year's budget, but nothing is guaranteed at this point.
The middle mile has changed at least a handful of times over the past couple of years, and it really throws a wrench into things for people like myself in engineering, where you're trying to figure out, okay, you want to expand out into an area that's not currently served. Okay, jump on the middle mile, and that offsets a lot of the potential costs that you would have, and makes the project doable, right? Makes the numbers come out. And then all of a sudden, 10 miles of middle mile you were counting on is gone. It really gets difficult. So hopefully that will be the case, that they'll fund that in the nearer term, rather than letting it go way out some, 10 years or 5 years.
From what I've heard from the state, I'm fairly confident they'll at least try to fund it in next year's budget.
That would be great.
So the last program, it's the one we have the least details about. It is BEAD. So there was about $46 billion appropriated in the infrastructure bill. California, on a calculation of need, got about $1.86 billion. And as I mentioned, We should have a better feel of the program next month when the CPUC issues draft guidance on the program. They have mentioned that it could be a competitive grant instead of an allocation like FFA. So that means we will need to be proactive and on top of it, and master plan will help us with that, advocating for B dollars in Lake County. So in 2019, the county put together a master broadband plan, and then in anticipation with all this federal funding for broadband and just the need of broadband service that became clear with the pandemic, commissioned an updated version of it, working with CBG. So there's been a lot of analysis of kind of level of service, and a major issue with broadband policy and funding has been mapping, really figuring out who has broadband and at what quality. Thankfully, the FCC has finally put together high-quality maps. They're not 100% accurate, but they go down to the household, and that's been really useful, kind of thinking through what we can do in Lake County. We've been doing a fair amount of community outreach to industry, tribal nations, different nonprofits, different entities within the county. Thinking through different policy recommendations, what we can do in the built environment, how we can utilize county resources, what funding sources we can go after. And then this is just portions of the online map CBG has put together. So we were going to put out a link to it. It's also linked in the report. It's an interactive map that you can look through different levels of service. And then also other layers for different proposed projects and such things as community anchor institutions. And this is highly speculative. It kind of is contingent on what are the FFA projects that are actually going to come in, what are the BEAD projects. So we were kind of thinking, well, if certain areas are going to be covered with those funding, kind of what are the other gaps we can fill? So this is just preliminary analysis. Also trying to lean on the middle mile network, understanding kind of the level of funding and what's realistic for a project to pencil out.
Ben, if I could just jump in real quick. The value of a map like this, although speculative, as Ben was saying, is that you can then drill down onto this map where this functionality really didn't exist just a few years ago in the broadband world anyway. You can drill down and then you can click inside any one of these polygons and it will give you information of how many unserved households reside inside of that box. So you can start to play around with those polygons and figure out, okay, if we did this, how many households would be impacted by it, and so it really helps in the next stage of the project that we'll be working on with the county. But thought I'd point that out.
Sounds great. And is there any additional comment quickly you want to provide, Dick, on the updated master plan?
Boy, how much time have you got, right? It's the updated plan includes both availability, which is the physical assets, where can you get it, where can't you get it, regardless of price or any other issue like that. And then the second half, which I didn't work so much on, but our company did, different people in our company, is the availability or the adoption piece. Okay, so the first thing that plays into adoption is, well, I can't even get it here. It doesn't physically exist. Okay, that's part of adoption. But then you get into all kinds of socioeconomic issues. It's too expensive. I don't need it. I don't know how to use it. All of these different adoption issues that are a part of the puzzle as well. So now as you deploy more out into the county with broadband, getting it to where people can afford it, people know how to use it, people, I guess, rely on it. They do their banking the new way, right, online, as opposed to having to run to the bank to do it. And anybody that's got internet, that which is the very vast majority of us, knows what it brings to the table and what functionality and efficiencies it brings. So teaching that to people and getting that into people's hands is also part of it. And so a lot of the issues with both availability and adoption have been figured out, if you will, at this stage. Okay, so now we know what the issues are. It's not anecdotal. It's updated. It's it's proven as best it can be. Now the next piece is the implementation plan, which will actually address how do we go after fixing some of these pieces. So adoption, okay, we got the $28.4 million that's sitting there. How can we most efficiently use that to get to the most households, residents, businesses, and so on and so forth. So that's part of that will be more the focus of the implementation plan, as well as addressing some of those adoption issues of affordability and those kinds of things. So,
Thank you. Any questions?
Supervisor Sabatier?
Yes, I appreciate getting this updated. That's step one, in order to make sure that we utilize all the available funds to the best of our needs. Is this a final draft of the revised master plan for broadband?
I want to incorporate some of the more implementation directions, so I think it would be really useful once we get the BEAD guidance, because that could be a significant amount of funding, and the county could be much more hands-on with that than the FFA, because we don't directly control anything with FFA, so I think that should be incorporated into the report.
So, and then once it's incorporated and finalized, it'll come back to us for final approval?
Correct.
Okay, so some of my comments I'll just keep privately so we can maybe see some of those made in there, because they're mostly words or typos or things like that. So I know that the FCC but opened up their maps and were soliciting public comment for changing their maps, because their maps may not always be correct. Have we submitted anything to the FCC and saying we found something here that you're not showing on your maps? There is access, or there's definitely not access occurring here. I know in our some of our NACO meetings, especially with economic mobility, broadband has been a big topic, and it seems that a few of the jurisdictions that I work with, or that I'm on the committee with, have had to make some pretty drastic changes to their maps that the FCC originated with.
Lake County itself has not. I know a few ISPs have, but no, we have not.
Okay, because I know that we're building a whole bunch of different maps based on different data sets, and I appreciate that. We have to look at different things, but want to make sure that eventually, especially an ISP or some other major corporation, they're probably going to go to the FCC for those types of maps rather than ask locally for those maps, I'm guessing. So making sure that we're all on the same page with our findings. There was also mention about some of the fiber access that we have, like LCOE and things like that. I think I mentioned it last time, and I just want to keep mentioning it because I don't believe I'm wrong, but our community college, at least Woodland, has a different pipeline that it connects to, and I didn't find anything related to that pipeline. I believe LCOE's comes from Ukiah, but I believe that Woodland's pipeline comes through Calistoga or from the Napa area.
Yeah, so we were going to reach out to both Mendocino and Woodland and see if there's potential partnerships. There could be something with BEAD funding, using them as community anchor institutions. I do think most of the residential build-out will be built upon the middle mile because that's public, whereas the community colleges, that's a private connection. But there might be something interesting to do with that feed they have.
And especially there's redundancy potential. right in the city of Clear Lake near Dam Road, because both those fibers are literally maybe 200 feet apart, so that if LCOE goes down, maybe the college can support them, or if the college goes down, LCOE can support them. That way our educational facilities are always going to be online. It was a project that was brought to my attention when I worked over at the college, and I have not heard about that since then. So again, just want a reminder, just because I think redundancies are part of the solution in ensuring that we never go down. Not only are we deploying more, but then we're also less going to go down. My final question is, within the report, it talks about commercial buildings or just access to our businesses for internet. Is there a map that shows the density of businesses to see when you take a business density map and put it on top of a broadband speed map, that we can make sure that maybe that's some of our priorities, is to ensure our businesses have good access to those things as well? Because it's part of today's business solution is you have to have reliable and fast internet in order to really compete. And so just kind of wondering if those maps exist, if that's been discussed, is that something people do?
That map it does not exist. There's no reason it couldn't. The FCC looks at an address as an address, right? Regardless if it's a business, a residential, I believe even anchor institutions. They're all just an address. But once you've got that information about that address, now you throw another layer on top of it that defines it as a business, right? So is it doable? I would think it's doable if we've got a good base map or a good layer that is of businesses in each community or county-wide. Not sure where to find that, but I can certainly look for it.
And just as a suggestion, maybe our zoning map, where we look at C1, C2, and C3 or things like that to help at least get an idea. It may not have a business there, but at least it's an opportunity for a business. And therefore, if we make sure that there's good broadband deployed in those areas, whatever business may develop there or what business already exists will benefit from whatever project we decide to focus on. Just something I was thinking about as I was driving through this. And that's the last of it. I appreciate the updates, and let's get that $28 million and put it to use.
That's right. No, the only thing about using a zoning map is a zoning map will show an address that will not show up. You've got to be careful, and here, I'll explain real quickly. If you put it on a zoning map that has an address of where a business could be, but it's just a field today, how does that react to the FCC's map that doesn't even show an address there, and vice versa? So yes, can it be looked at? Can it be experimented with? Absolutely. We'll come up with something.
There's probably some community development data we could pull for that.
Yep.
I was just going to add quickly with business. That's definitely an issue Lake County faces with the cost of broadband. I was kind of shocked with our conversations how much it costs. I know the residential rate is significantly higher than kind of the average national rate, but especially with businesses here, it's frankly, some of them, it's fairly exorbitant. So I think the middle mile will help a lot with that, be it with open access network or just ISPs building off of it. But there also might be some creative solutions with the BEAD money or CASF.
When I was in the background of a discussion that our company held with, I forget if it was vineyards or wineries, but at any rate, right in the middle of the city, Lakeport. And that's got MediaCom right there, and that's about as good as it gets in the county for broadband, other than one-offs from AT&T. In other words, just, if you pay the thousands of dollars to get it from AT&T to go that extra distance, that's available. But the people there were saying that they can't get MediaCom, even though they're within a block of MediaCom. I just find there's just a disconnect there, and I don't know what it is yet, but I'll look into it, because they're paying for 2 or 3 different cellular services to get marginal service when, to me, a couple $100 for an install, they should be able to get MediaCom. So what's going on there? That's part of the next step to figuring those things out. And I apologize if you can hear my dogs in the background.
Any other questions from the board? I'll open up for public comment. Do we have any public comments on this? Okay, then bring it back to the board. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
There's nothing further. I think this was just presentation.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
We're going to take a 5-minute break. 7.5, consideration of A, request for exemption from competitive bidding pursuant to Section 38.1 of the County of Lake Purchasing Ordinance, and B, agreement between the County of Lake and Resource Development Associates for consultation and support in the Community Program Planning, CPP, process in the amount of $310,920 for fiscal years 2023 to 2024, 2024 to 2025, 2025 to 2026, and authorize the board chair to sign. Behavioral Health Director Jones.
Hello, thank you so much. I wonder if it might be more effective to just ask what questions there are from the board rather than give an overview or presentation. I wouldn't have much more than the memo, or just in the interest of time.
Questions? Supervisor Sabatier.
I guess it's a question/comment. I know that the waiving of the bidding is using 38.1, which is basically saying it's an extension to an agreement. However, the agreement as it's drafted is not an amendment to an agreement or an extension. It seems to stand on its own, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this is an association with MHSA, which is a 3-year plan. Therefore, they do the support of the 3-year plan. That's hence the 23-24 through 25-26. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then when was the last time we did an RFP for this?
I'm not able to answer that, and I'm not sure. It would have been many, many years ago, even before 16-17. So I will take the opportunity, given where I understand the information is needed now, to provide a bit of context, which is that, yes, this is a standalone contract for the next iteration of the 3-year plan. However, I want to emphasize the word iteration. The MHSA plan and program is an iterative process, and so the plan that your board has previously approved, and the one that it will again hopefully, builds on every single plan that came before it. And so having this consultant work with us provides a level of continuity and oversight that is highly desirable. And anecdotally, or I guess just informationally, I would say that as a behavioral health director, I think one of the core duties is also to maintain situational awareness of the market. And I've been immersed in the field and MHSA land and consulting land for behavioral health long enough to know that RDA, or the consultant with whom we're recommending to contract, is about top tier, and anyone in this kind of range who provides this level of services is going to provide a comparable service for pretty much the same price. And so that's the information that I have.
And I appreciate the comments, and just my personal opinion is that that is what the RFP process would provide for us, is that exact information, and I'm just uncomfortable with moving forward. I think we have to have something in place. I'd be willing to look at a single year and do the RFP process like we've done with others. But every week, different departments keep asking to waive the bidding. My concerns continue to grow. It's not your department, it's our overall process. I am working with staff to alleviate some of those burdens, while also trying to provide better guidance on the specifics of an RFP process. I think that we are leaning towards deviating from RFPs rather than figuring out if we actually have to do one. And in this one, I think we should be looking at doing one.
Supervisor Green?
Yeah, so from the staff report, from my own education, so we didn't do an RFP, but it looks like there was an RFQ. Basically to qualify that contractor. Were there other contractors that submitted for the RFQ process?
No.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments? Any public comment? Anyone in the Zoom room? No? Okay, then I'll bring it back to the board for action.
There's nothing further, Madam Chair. I move to approve the request for exemption from competitive bidding and approve the agreement between the County of Lake and Resource Development Associates for consultation and support in the Community Program Planning, CPP, process for fiscal years 2023-24, 2024-25, 2025-26 in the amount of $310,920 and authorize the board chair to sign.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, thank you. And
There's a B. Is it the same?
we
Got it.
combined them, yeah.
Sorry. Thank you.
It's okay. Long day already.
Yes.
Okay, we need to go back to 5.2. And I do want to make sure we have our treasurer tax collector on for this. I know he was part of the discussion before. He's on. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, 5.2, adopt resolution of the County of Lake Board of Supervisors approving, authorizing, and directing execution of a joint exercise of powers agreement relating to the California Cannabis Authority and authorize the chair to sign. And this is an item from Supervisor Green, but pulled by Supervisor Sabatier. So I don't know who wants to go. I'll let you go first, I guess. Your pen's up.
Would you like to present and I state my statement, or would you like me to state my statement?
Just very briefly, this is in follow-up to your board's prior action in June to join. Was a split vote, 3-2, I grant that. But the vote having been executed, County Council has worked with General Counsel for CCA, and the specific process of joining the GPA is the process outlined here, which is the execution of a counterpart to their standard JPA agreement. There are no substantive changes to that agreement that I'm aware of. There are some housekeeping cosmetic change, not cosmetic, but housekeeping changes to certain code citations and some update to the document to actually show the words County of Lake on there as a member. And there's a resolution in there also that would handle the housekeeping chore of assigning a delegate to the CCA upon execution of the JPA agreement. I will defer to County Counsel as to any additional comments he wishes to offer, but I believe what is presented to you has been vetted as thoroughly as possible with not one but two attorneys and myself. So thank you.
Supervisor Sabatier, unless you have something to add. Okay, Supervisor Sabatier.
Thank you. So there's two things. One, I don't see a amount in the resolution or in the agreement, and I'm not sure if there's a specific years of how long that amount will be. If we are signing, it doesn't appear that we're signing up for multiple years. It just appears like we're signing on and we can quit out of this group anytime we want. But there's no defined amount in any of the documentation that I can see, yet there's an amount that's correlated to this. And so I'm wondering where that needs to be placed, or if I'm mistaken and it doesn't belong in the document.
I believe the allocation was approved when we approved the final budget.
But I don't think we should give money to somebody without having it in writing as to what we're giving them and how much, why we're giving it to them. Having it in our budget is one thing.
Well, we're executing the JPA today. We're going to get billed later for the amount. And so we're not approving, the allocation was made in the budget, previously approved. No payment is due with the execution of this JPA today. Once we get that to them and they say, okay, Lake County, welcome, then they will start invoicing for dues.
And the amounts originally that I had heard were much larger than the 28,000 or whatever it is that it was. Should we see an increase or a large increase or something similar in the following years? And
well, the reason this amount is lower is because your board opted not to, at that time, approve the subscription to the analytics, the software platform for track and trace and tax compliance purposes. And I respect that decision, so we're not going down that road this year. It is very much an open question in the few meetings I've been able to attend as kind of a lurker, so to speak. Our addition changes their financial outlook. They just approved their final budget for the next fiscal year based on not actually our joining, but based on their understanding of the revenues they're going to get from their JPA members. As you might expect, things change in cannabis world, as we've seen in the commercial things. Certainly things have been changing for CCA during the time they've been up and running. I don't have direct knowledge of their strengths and weaknesses or challenges. I can't predict what next year's dues are going to be because I can't predict what the other counties are going to do, and I can't predict what this board is going to do as far as whether we do end up trying to get some additional services out of this or if we're just going to stick with the annual subscription. So I think they're fair questions. I just don't have any answers for you.
Okay. And then two more things real fast. One of them is this is a public meeting, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you can be a part of the meeting, provide public feedback without necessarily having to be a member. You just don't get to vote, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And they put out their agendas. It's a JPA, so guess what? They get Zoom. They're not subject to certain Brown Act requirements, so that's kind of cool.
So my concern is that we still have the ability to engage. I don't know that we're going to sway the different direction that it's going to go. And also my other concern is if we join and we're not getting any benefit of the products, is it worth $30,000 just for a vote? It's just a question that I have. I don't know that it's worth the $28,000. And also we're providing them with all of the information of our current legal data. So all the data of our cannabis cultivators and things will all be provided to them.
Yeah.
That's what it says in there, that we are doing, we're part of the sharing.
Had we exercised the subscription add-on, we would have invoked that process to loop our growers in, and you know, that whole API process would have been activated upon that. Since we are not using the analytics platform, there's no reason for us to go through that. We wouldn't ask, you know, growers to submit an API key for a software platform we're choosing not to use. So it could be a potential issue if we, again, latch onto that analytics platform in years future, but we're not at that point right now. So it does, in the JPA agreement, outline that authority and that process that would be used if we were to use the CCA analytics platform for tracking and compliance purposes. At this stage, we are not.
Okay, I'll have to, as the conversation continues, look for that, but I could have sworn I saw statements in the fact that if we join, then we would share information, and I just think that at this point, I'm not sure that I'd be comfortable if that was the case, but I'll take your word for it at this moment and keep looking.
So I have some questions too. I'm not really comfortable signing a contract that doesn't have the contract amount in it. It looks like it's for a fiscal year. I'm not sure if it's year to year, so I would like to see that in the contract, and I would also like to see it prorated if it's for a fiscal year, since we're joining a little bit later. There's another section, Section 8. It says fees and compensation. Members may receive such compensation, if any, for their services and reimbursements and expenses. So I'm a little concerned about that. If we're paying to join this board and then they're paying the members, I feel that should probably come back to the county, correct?
I'm not aware of anybody actually getting paid. And to be clear, this is not a contract. This is a special creature. This is a joint powers agreement, and we don't have a choice about tweaking this. We can, the actual process outlined in this agreement, and I don't have it chapter and verse, but maybe county council can find it, is the only action before us today is to execute the JPA agreement as a counterpart. That is to say, we're basically taking the same step that the initial counties did when they formed the JPA, and as outlined in this JPA agreement, should additional counties wish to join, there is a specific process outlined, and that specific process is what is before you today. It is to execute a counterpart to the original agreement that created the Joint Powers Authority. There is no additional requirement for a contract. Should this be approved today, there will be no additional action by the JPA board, as I understand it from Mr. Turner, their general counsel. So this is the bundle. If we're going to join, it's going to come in this form. If you want to, upon joining, then request additional clarification or some type of contract because there's some uncertainty about that, I can certainly approach them about that. But it would premature to do so now because, the original vote we took in June was to go ahead and authorize a membership but not the software. If we're going to honor that vote, the mechanism that's been identified and vetted is this agreement that's before you.
Supervisor Sabatier?
And just real quick, I'm going to read it. Section 1 of Article 4, powers of the CCA, item number 24, states has the power to collect licensed data, tax data, and financial records, which the CCA agrees to maintain as confidential information and shall remain exempt from disclosure under the Public Records Act. So this does not say if we sign up for any additional systems or anything like that, that we will be sharing that information. And I'm not sure what our goal is with this group as far as what Lake County is looking for. But until I know, I'm not certain that I'm comfortable with basically giving them the power to collect our license data, tax data, and financial records.
So when we had this discussion before, we talked about it as a package with joining the JPA and the software package. And since we've separated that out, I'm just unclear on what it is we're trying to achieve here. What are going to be the deliverables? What are we expecting to get out of this? Because we separated those two out in our last discussion. And so I'm just wondering if you could share that, because I think that's important for all of us to understand.
Well, it seems like we asked and answered this in June when we took the original vote. Obviously, there's some uncertainty as to the value we're going to get short of the software package and short of the additional services they also have for consulting. At the time, we have a cannabis task force. We did talk briefly about the consulting services that are available through the CCA, which is pretty high-level stuff. But there was not interest from the board at that time to leverage that. What type of value is involved with just a simple membership? Well, I can just share that the few meetings I've attended, I've learned so much about what different counties are doing, and they're not literally all over the map. They're also figuratively all over the map in their approaches to cannabis regulation. We don't have from the state, notwithstanding the baby steps that have been taken by the Department of Cannabis Control to better serve local governments and be more transparent to local governments. I think to the extent they have started opening up some local access, at least county level access to some of the track and trace data that the State Department is collecting, I believe it has been the efforts of CCA to leverage that information for the benefit of their member counties. We've been all our own, right? When MRSA was first passed and then Prop 64 passed, cannabis regulation at the state level was a three-headed monster. And then a couple years ago, we decided to consolidate it, or the state did, into this unified Department of Cannabis Control, which I'll be honest is a work in progress, and their track record on engagement is certainly not flawless. Having the ability to speak with different counties about their issues and also to speak with different departments within those counties. What are their pain points? What are those counties that do use the compliance software for interested in, and what benefits do they see? They also, even the software package users, see the limits in their own software platform because they don't get to share information that falls outside their county's jurisdiction. So if you have a big producing county that's basically producing flowers and stuff, but the export goes to other counties for processing and manufacturing and stuff like that, we don't have a good picture from the state, and we don't have a good picture right now, even with the analytics platform, what the full picture is of how cannabis is being grown, how it's being processed, how it's being moved, whether compliance work is needed, or if everything is just off to the races and just humming right along. So it's been a journey just from the self-reporting that I've heard from the member counties, a mix of policy people, one or two supervisors, more treasurer, tax collector type people right now. And I think it is fair to say that this JPA has reflected the changes of the industry and of the state in approaching regulation. It has done what it's done up to this point. That doesn't mean that same approach is going to be useful or widely accepted among the member counties as we move forward. And as much as I've benefited from them, I think we're actually at an inflection point where they could actually benefit from new voices and new experiences and seeing what's working and what's not working for the member counties. And if we can put our collective minds together and actually say, are we all on track, or is this totally whatever goes county by county? Is this a workable system? Is this a sustainable system? Don't know the answer to that just yet. So I see a lot of opportunity for cross-pollination and cross-fertilization of ideas, and from that ability to advocate somewhat for change both within the Department of Cannabis Control and potentially some statutory or legislative changes that may be needed.
So it sounds like you're attending the meetings and learning a lot. You're also talking about the platform that we're not participating with, and I know we have our treasurer tax collector on, who will probably want to weigh in at one point. But and you say we're getting to the point where everyone's learning from us, and that was the experience that I had when I sat in on their meeting, and I think Supervisor Sabatier can speak to his experience too, is they were asking us for our experience because we're so much further along than the other counties, which is why I disagreed with this back in June, because I felt like they wanted us for our experience and likely access to our data. So I'm just wondering, again, like, what will we expect from this to improve? Like, what are some measurables that we can expect to see from this?
Well, let me just ask a process question. We took this vote in June. Why am I now having to justify it again? I brought this item forward to fulfill the will of the board that was expressed in June, not to open it up for a second bite at the apple, right? So we either stick to our guns and say, you don't have to like the vote that happened in June, but the direction was pretty darn clear, and the money did get set aside in the next budget. So we're here to execute the JPA. If you think something has arisen since June that gives you greater pause than you did then, and I haven't heard anything new, you're basically repeating the same stuff you said in June.
It's the agreement that we're looking at.
Well, then let's focus on the agreement.
Okay, and we brought up some issues, but you said we were not allowed to change them. I do want to let Patrick Sullivan speak.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board. There were a few points I was just going to bring up in relation to the state metric viewer, the software we're going to be given access through Department of Cannabis Control. I wasn't sure exactly what this item was about, but I thought it might be relevant. This week, we received our notification from the state that we are being given access, so that CDD and tax are going to be the primary points of contact. We'll be able to authorize access for other users that have a viable purpose. The nice part about this software is that it is, free to us as a county government. I don't know that it will ever be able to do everything that the platform does, but I know they are trying. We're supposed to be able to have a basic training done sometime in the next few months. And then in spring, I think after they get everybody up online, the state is going to do an audit training that is supposed to be more intensive, and it's going to be in person. So I think that will provide CDD staff and tax staff that are able to go the opportunity to go to Sacramento and get a feel for what this software can do. I know we're supposed to be able to see all of that self-reported data and licensing data. I think it's more in the raw form. I don't think it has a lot of the analytics that TCA is trying to develop. But I think for our purposes, it's finally going to give us that window into the data that we have wanted. And at least since it's free, I feel like there's no harm in really trying it out. But yeah, I was just going to add that into the discussion in case it's relevant. CCA software, I know they've put a lot of effort and money into the analytics. I know that's why it's so expensive. So while I can't speak to exactly what the state metric viewer system will be like for us yet, I can just say that we do actually have access now once we complete the training.
Okay, thank you. And did you have a comment, Supervisor Sabatier? You had your pen up a minute ago. Well,
no, I'll just say it's asking for our vote, and we have the ability to choose which direction to vote. I felt the same way I did back in June, that we are only signing up so we can get a vote on something that we are not necessarily benefiting from because we can publicly engage. They're talking about looking at federal law for banking. That's going to happen whether we're engaged or not. We can provide public comment if we want, but I don't know that it's worth the dollar amount for something that I think we had better ways to spend that money. And today you're asking for my vote to continue moving forward, and I have the ability and the right to choose nay or yay. And so,
Vice Chair Simon?
Yeah, just looking at some of the stuff, I know we're looking at the amended agreement, members' responsibilities. Is this where you were reading from, or is that a different section of this agreement, Bruno?
I was looking at the Article 4 on page 11, where it talks about the powers of the CCA.
All right, and I was looking at, let's see here, ended 9/24/1, page 50, members' responsibilities. It's got A, B, C, and D, and the one, when I read through this, really jumps out to me is, it says D, adopt or amend ordinances to require persons engaged in commercial cannabis as conditioned of their license, permit, or other authorization to operate to comply with any and all requirements imposed by CCA on commercial cannabis operators or operations. And just above that, it says each member shall in all ways cooperate with and assist the authority in all matters relating to this agreement to apply by the bylaws and policies, procedures, and rules promulgated by the authority. When we're still working on trying to get our ordinances correct. And while I see the value of a JPA, and I do, Mike, I see the value of being able to attend the meetings and other things. There are many different JPAs that we're involved with here, both at the county level, both for LTA, APC, Workforce Alliance in North Bay. I don't think any of them say we will adopt or amend ordinances. That's for our purview here as the board. And it makes a challenge. And yes, that's different than, I was one of the ones that helped move this along. But now looking at it, reading through it, having some more time to, really delve into it we went through it today for a long time, and we're going to be doing another iteration because there were concerns brought up of what we move forward with today. And if we're giving the authority away to the CCA to say, hey, we're going to make changes that we think is going to fix it for Lake County, I just think it's going to complicate things even more. So looking at it a little bit more, I'm not sure if I can support this today moving forward too.
Can I ask you what pages you were looking at? I can't seem to find it. Page 5? Thank you for that.
Because even with the other JPAs, the LTA, the APC, Workforce Alliance, we separate ourselves as board members on there, even with LAFCO, to have independent, we look at these, anything LAFCO does would not restrict this board from making decisions. Now, you'd have to go through the LAFCO process, but it wouldn't make us amend our own rules, ordinances, or anything like that.
As a courtesy, Mr. Turner is general counsel for CCA. If there are actual legal questions as to the impact of any clause of this JPA agreement, I would just request, he was not available today. He has other duties. Guess what? CCA really does stuff. So I just ask, is the consensus of this board that you're concerned about some legal clause, or are you just really just kind of over the fact? You think I can just tune in from afar and not spend $28K and we're going to get as much bang for the buck? If there are actual interpretations of the JPA agreement that Mr. Turner can help clarify, then I would request we just postpone this a week and allow him the courtesy of being able to respond.
I think we can ask our county council his interpretation of this.
Yes, so, sorry.
It is page 5. Yeah, I thought it was 15. I didn't
It looks like
I have my glasses.
Didn't make it big enough, sorry.
That's why I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
My glasses do both, so.
So that particular subsection under page 5, section 6, sub D, can be interpreted as a shall as opposed to a may. So this, in essence, is an agreement, a joint exercise of powers agreement, and much like any agreement or document, it's being proposed to your board. And if there are any amendments that your board may want to consider in this agreement, it could be proposed as a counter. And your board's approval of the agreement with such amendments could be subject to that. Unlike any typical, the usual agreements that the county, where the county utilizes the standard template agreement, this is an agreement with a joint powers authority. Mr. Turner, I have been in communication with Mr. Turner. He indicated that the next meeting for the CCA will occur in October, and that sometime in October, and that may be the time where the CCA may consider some amendments, not just coming from this side, but also from any possible amendments that they're looking to have in for the use of their agreement. And so I think amendments are possible, just like in any other agreements, and your board's approval can be subject to that. Now, as Supervisor Green mentioned, if further discussion can take place as far as the specific provisions of the current agreement that's being proposed, that's also another possible option for your board, so that further clarification can be made with Mr. Turner present. That is also an option.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yes. In looking at the most recent document that, like the clean version, I guess you could say, at the bottom it shows that Mendocino is inactive. Do you happen to know why they're inactive?
I don't have the full story. I believe they were an original software subscriber, and they probably had some sticker shock. But I don't want to misstate the facts.
And then I've also, and I've also have spoke with a couple of colleagues, and they're not there to make utter change, if you will. They're there to see what's going on. And I know that I voted yes to direct staff to prepare a budget for this. Let's see, I have it right here. Direct staff to prepare a budget item for the potential addition to this. But that, we voted no on the second. And then just talking to colleagues and then seeing Mendocino inactive, I think we can do this from afar. Do they also report at CSAC, do you know? Are they a part of that, or?
Well, as a reminder, CCA is an offshoot of CSAC Financial Corporation. And so there is, other than CCA, I'm not aware that CSAC or RCRC or any of our go-to policy groups are really standing up and taking ownership of cannabis regulation, which is sad. And so this CCA, JPA, as limited as scope as it may be, and as all over the map it is in terms of its current purpose and where it may be headed in the future, I think the need that was stated when it was formed in the first place was substantial and continues to be substantial, at least in terms of track and trace. Some things like banking may resolve themselves, but there may be steps we can take, interim steps. Driving policy, they had a bill didn't get out of this legislative session, but it would have provided funding so they could have served all 58 counties as opposed to just those people brave enough to sign up. But the governor's office was not in support of that. So we have, I won't call it a turf war, but obviously there's some debate at a state level about what DCC's proper role is and what CCA's supportive role or non-supportive role, or I don't really get what the perspective is. And again, it's really going to depend on who you talk to at what level of government. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if at CSAC that they update their policies each year, how they're going to advocate legislatively. But I know in RCRC, we had an ad hoc working group last year and discussed the very things you're talking about, track and trace and banking. And I know when we went to DC, we had discussed with the representatives to move forward with some of that. And of course, they didn't give us any information on it. But I'm just mentioning that because you mentioned it. So I don't know if this takes a deeper dive or anything of that nature, but I know it's talked about in RCRC.
Yeah, I just want to engage with our other counties and our other stakeholders in the state. We're in such silos, and we may think that we're all that, and we're the best permit program since sliced bread, but other counties have gone through just massively different experiments in how they've handled their land use permitting and how they've handled their compliance on track and trace and tax payments. And I think it's more than just an anomaly. It's more than just, oh, look at all these different counties kind of doing their own thing. It's, are we being effective? Are we not only managing our own programs effectively, are we interfacing with our neighbors effectively and the state effectively? And these are important discussions to have. I don't know if I don't know if I can do any better with CCA and their board in nudging discussion of these issues than I can with this board. But I'm open to the idea that we should try. And if we go through a year and it's a total bust and we've, in the board's view, wasted 28K, we wasted much more on probably some other pilot projects and some ideas that didn't pan out. But to me, to walk away from this now is to just accept that we know what's best, and whatever the rest of the state and whatever the other counties are up to, that's information we don't need right now. We don't need to leverage that cooperation between counties and between cannabis regulatory authorities. And I see a lot of room for improvement. And I think CCA is the only vehicle that I know of right now that is on point to actually address some of these issues head on. And I don't see that CSAC has the horsepower or the interest to do that. And I don't think RCC, to the limited extent I know what they're doing, is engaged fully on this subject either. So
the only thing that they necessarily do is when we put together at the ad hoc committee is when they deal with legislation at the Capitol where they're at, they just emphasize the vote of the collaborative board of directors group from the working group. Some of the issues you're talking about, like track and trace and how to deal with cities, or so they don't necessarily attack it head on, but they do have these policy revisions in mind. That's the only difference. And I know, like, in looking at the list of some of these folks, I don't feel like we know best, but at the same time, I know these guys joke all the time because some of them have been doing it for quite some time. So I don't think there's any way I would think we're better than Humboldt or Mendocino. So I don't know. For me, I think I don't think I can support this any longer.
Supervisor Sabatier?
I just wanted to make the comment that having communication with the different counties to figure out what they're doing and finding the pros and cons of what they think that has worked well or not well within their counties is possible outside of this. And again, it's a public meeting. You can continue being a part of the meeting, and if there's something that you feel we need to support that they're working on, we can always do a letter of support to make sure that we follow a bill and do what we can. There's nothing that stops us from advocating from our seat and being up to date on what the conversations are and understanding what other counties are doing, because those conversations are free. I think that the benefit of being a member is accessing their systems. We are choosing not to access their systems. And so I go back to not understanding the benefit of just having a seat at the table when a seat at the table minus a vote is still available.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for the public. Do we have anybody in the Zoom room? No? Okay, bring it back to the board for action.
I'm going to offer the resolution, if only to have it die for lack of a second.
All right.
right. Supervisor Simon?
No.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Nay.
Supervisor Crandall? Supervisor Green?
Aye.
And Supervisor Pyska?
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we have 7.1, our calendars, and I know we didn't do that last week, so if anyone feels like they've got a report on the last couple weeks, go for it. Who wants to start?
I'll go ahead and get started. I'll try to be brief. I hear there's a birthday that needs to be celebrated. Just wanted to say that I feel like there's some good headway in looking at solving part of the solution for our ambulance stuff. We have high potential for EMT courses starting on the high school level. As soon as I get a little bit more concrete evidence after next week's meeting, I hope to provide some even better news. Also, the ambulance ordinance committee, or the group that is meeting, has discussed the ordinance. Good discussion and good contribution from hospital, fire district, and our PHO, and so look into that continuation. And now I'll go ahead and move forward for what's next. And I have my first thank you for approving the appointment to the NACO Health Steering Committee. I'm going to have my first meeting tomorrow. Lots of things that I can't even see what it is. I'm going to meet with LG Sonic to continue the conversation that I had started here before, just to see if there's another option that I can bring to the board, as I believe there might be another better option and opportunity, and so wanting to look into that. Going to go to the Lake County Fire Chiefs Association meeting that's happening over in Clear Lake, most likely at Station 70. And I know there's a First 5 Lake Commission meeting happening. Supervisor Green, you'll be making that meeting, or do I need to step up for that?
When?
On Wednesday in the afternoon at 2 p.m.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then later on that evening, I will be here in Lakeport for the town hall. In fact, I'll be helping PEG TV, but also have great interest in the homeless town hall meeting that the city of Lakeport is putting together. Have a Hope Rising meeting on Thursday. Then on Friday, I'll be meeting with Supervisor Green over at the old juvenile hall to have some discussions about what's possible for the future there. Have a meeting about Lake Pillsbury and Potter Valley at the courthouse. And just a bunch of stuff that's school related. And I'm going to stop right there because I don't think I have anything else on that Monday. Middle Creek Project Committee, I apologize. Have a meeting on Monday for that?
Yeah, it should be
Okay,
restoration. Right?
we already skipped a month. It goes by so quickly. Meeting with our CAO, and then back here on the 3rd. It's October already.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yeah, I was trying to look for my notes from the RCRC, but so last week, Wednesday, after we traveled the night after the meeting, we got to the annual meeting, a series of different events. Initially, commonly each annual meeting, they bring forward some talkers, people speak, public speakers that have knowledge about a specific, initiative. There's also like a talking session amongst different keynote speakers from different counties who've dealt with situations and whatnot. So there was a gentleman, and I don't remember his name. You'll remember it. I know you will. So,
Kyle Warner.
Kyle Warner, who talked about trails in a community in regard to mountain biking, but I'll let you explain that more in depth. There was also discussion about political climate, and there was a gentleman who talked about the political climate of not only the United States, but in general, and how a lot of the generation, the biggest population of generation now is becoming more independent than anything, and that was an interesting thought and a topic of discussion. There was a presentation on fentanyl, and we were named as one of the top 4 in regard to fentanyl. It was an interesting discussion because not only was there an initiative that one county had put forward And I don't remember the acronym. I think it was one pill saves or something like that.
One pill can kill.
One pill can kill. And it was just basically advertised everywhere so that people are always remembering and being educated. But also there was a DA, and I think she was from was it
Placer.
Placer. I also thought it would have been. I thought it was the other one in Santa Cruz, because I know we're dealing with Santa Cruz and a couple other things. No, yay. And so, but that DA had accentuated some of the struggles that we have when it comes to holding specific repeat offenders accountable, especially in regard to meth and also fentanyl. So, very good topic of discussion. Let's see. The next day we had actually Adrian. Yeah.
Okay, now I don't remember her last.
Okay, yeah, it was. I'll remember it, but she survived the Boston Marathon terrorist attack, and it was a very motivational discussion. I don't think anybody in the room had a cell phone in their hand, so she was. Yeah, it was intriguing, and I was just complaining about my knees right before that, and then after she talked, I was like, okay, no, I'm never complaining about that again, because she walks, did a marathon, danced again, after she lost her legs. So I just know her name is Adrian. I talked with her afterwards for quite some time. But then in the evening, we did the annual the auction, and our basket sold for the most it's ever. I mean, since I've been on the board, I don't know. Otherwise, it was $900. Cal Water put 1,000 on it, and then did PG&E really put? They said they put 1,000 or something, but either or. So it went for basically 900, but then Cal Water put some on it too, and so yeah, that was really cool. I know we put together a good basket as a collaborative team, as we always do. The annual, or not the annual meeting, but the board meeting, RCRC, GSFA, and GSCA. They went fairly quick. I know that we said a lot of what was discussed about broadband, actually Ben brought a lot of it up. RCRC, we had a couple of updates about legislation, but mainly talked about a closed item session. And then also I gave my report on the EPA Farm, Ranch, and Rural Communities Federal Advisory Committee, which I'll be voting this Thursday in a special meeting on the letter that we'll be giving to Administrator Regan from our advisory group, giving recommendations. And so hopefully they'll be implementing, like I said before, there's usually 12 recommendations, and they take one from each group, each ad hoc group. And since we had 4, but now we have 3, hopefully we'll have 1 out of each 3 recommendations. So yeah, that was. I'm sure that Supervisor Pyska will have a lot more to add. But following that, Saturday we did the shoreline cleanup day. I was at the Lucerne Harbor, and let's see. Monday we did the CPUC meeting, which, as you know, we had an extra item as a result of it. This next week, let's see. Thursday I have that Farm, Ranch, and Rural committee meeting. I'm not sure if AAA is going to. I know they're looking for a quorum. I know we have a couple of them. Well, also we brought that up to our colleagues in RCRC, asking if they could work with us and advocate for us about the Brown Act requirements when it comes to ad hoc groups or different groups. Not so much Board of Supervisors, but these committees and ad hoc groups. It's a struggle getting people to these meetings and having a quorum. So that was one of our requests. Friday we have a Lake Pillsbury Potter Valley project meeting with Mendocino County, and then I have a COAD meeting in Lucerne, and then Monday CAO meeting, and then Middle Creek Restoration, then back here Tuesday.
Do you mind if I add something real quick? I just want to take the time to appreciate the amount of staff time that's been provided for the Lake Pillsbury. We meet at least once or twice a week, if not more, and staff is absolutely on top of it and engaged, and I just want to share appreciation for that.
Who's ready down here?
I can go.
Where was I? So Saturday was a big day in Lakeport. We did have the Clear Lake splash in, see the seaplanes, and also the experimental aircraft, which have experimental labels on them, and it doesn't make you feel better when you see that. But it was fascinating to see them. I got to speak with some of the pilots, and I'm very appreciative of that. And I got bundled this year with Taste in Lakeport, and I think there must have been at least one other thing going on that day. Oh yeah, Coastal Cleanup Day. There was an event at Library Park on that the city handled. I ended up at Highland Springs and met Marina from Water Resources, and some other folks came out. And sure enough, there was a fair amount of trash even out at Highland Springs. Let's see what else I got. Yesterday, Scotts Valley Community Advisory Council. I want to thank Sheriff's PIO Lauren Berlin and Lieutenant Bingham for coming out. They gave an update on emergency preparedness, basically focusing on the two apps that the sheriff does like to promote, and we all should too, because they work in tandem. And so one of them was Lakeco Alerts, and they pointed out, the web, where you can find it on the sheriff's website. We talked a little bit about whether we can do web badges or something to make it a little more prominent on the main website. And then what used to be Zone Haven, it got rebranded, unfortunately. So now it's Genesis Protect is the app. But the good news is none of our zone numbers changed in that migration to that new platform. The bad news is it's a new platform, and everyone that we finally got excited about Zone Haven may or may not know that they have to go look for this rebranded app. And it's kind of unique. The Lakeco Alerts actually requires people to do a user profile and stuff like that. This Genesis app, you can just get in there and look for your address, find your zone, and sign up for notifications without creating a user profile. So that's pretty cool. So if you haven't checked it out lately, Lakeco Alerts and now what used to be Zone Haven, Genesis Protect, is how this county is really working to get the word out when we have emergencies. And as we discussed at the council yesterday, it's very much an imperfect system. Even with that, we still need also ham radio operators and any number of alternative systems, including phone trees, to get the word out when bad things happen. We'll have First Five Commission tomorrow, apparently. We'll be touring Juvenile Hall with Supervisor Sabatier and some others on Friday to discuss next steps, possibilities out there. And I want to apologize. I was going to try to get to the Eco-Cultural Bio Blitz last Friday at Highland Springs, but I was unable to attend that. And that's it.
So I know we put stuff away. So the multi-use path is starting in Middletown, the math and Caltrans, and the tribe obviously supported that project with the support letter, so that started up. So very happy to see that work being done, both for safety reasons, but also, as we talked about, changing the health and of our community. It's going to be a great walking path. Also allow the horses to move back and forth as they do in South Lake County. So excited to see that project and that work being done in coordination with county, Caltrans, and our contractor that's working down there. So excited to see that happening. From the county side, I know the LAFCO was moved till October. October 4th. October. Oh, so we're having two of them then too. Yeah. Is it October 4th?
Same with Ava.
City of Clear Lake, so that's Ava too. Ava's going to also be happening next week, so cool. That perfectly lines up where we're at. Friday, spent the time down at the Capitol for California Indian Days. I was very excited to be down there with all the other tribal nations, celebrating that day as we move forward. So this week, after today's meeting, I have, I don't think I'm going to get an agenda review today, but I do have tomorrow. I'm going to attend the fire chief's meeting too. Some RRA conversation I think needs to happen there, so I'm going to try and attend. And then also Friday, the air curtain burner conversation. I've accepted a meeting for that that we got to take care of. And that's early enough where I can, CAO Parker, we can get back on the line and get that done. This weekend, have a funeral service that I'll be attending in South Lake County. And then, don't have anything, oh, I do have something on Sunday. I think Senator McGuire's doing something over in Hillsburg think I'm going to attend an event he has over there. I can't think of the name of it. I think I'm going to.
Chili cook-off?
I think that's maybe what it is. So I think I'm going to attend that, and then be back here on Monday, ready for the meeting on Tuesday.
Okay. So it was my first RCRC annual meeting. Had a great time. And first time what we've brought staff. And as you can see, we really need each other to remember everything because there's so much that happens. And it was amazing to have our assistant and deputy CAOs there to be soaking everything up and giving us the support that we need to roll things forward. There are some initiatives that we're going to be bringing to the board that we talked about, so we're super excited about that. The trails discussion was incredible, and then we ended up hanging out with him all night, picking his brain. And then, of course, I always go on trails wherever I go, so we went for a bike ride, all of us, and it was really fun until our assistant CAO broke his bike. But he got a new one, and we didn't ditch him for very long.
You gotta lead with that.
But what's really incredible about, what was really incredible about being there is that we heard so many comments. It's so great to see Lake here. It's so great that staff is here. By the way, your staff is incredible. That deputy CAO is incredible. I talked to your assistant CAO. We got a ton of feedback just on our staff and their engagement with everybody there. So that was just phenomenal. I love seeing that. It is an investment for us, but it's so critical where we are and all the initiatives that we want to be moving forward. So it was great. It was great.
Adrian Hazlitt.
See, we need each other. Yeah, she was amazing. So, yeah, I came home Friday, and then last night, well, I had a meeting yesterday with the Lieutenant Governor's office, and I think Supervisor Green has met with her also, with Dana Stapleton. I think she's reached out to everybody. She said she did. I encourage everyone to have a conversation with her because she wants to know what's going on in Lake County. I talked to her about Lake Pillsbury. I talked to her about your sonic boom things. Sonic boom. your algae busters. These are the opportunities that we have. I talked to her about our biomass issues. You know, she wanted. Thank you. Yeah, so we get contacted by these people when we're out at RCRC or wherever we are. We have a list in our minds of the most critical issues for our county, and these are the times to advocate. And so I reach out and check with her. She does want to get the Lieutenant Governor up into our county for a tour at some point. The Lieutenant Governor is very interested in water issues and environmental issues, and so all of these things fold right into what her priorities are, and I think that as soon as that video is done for Lake Pillsbury, we shoot it off to her and make sure, she wanted to get up there as soon as possible, but she's, you know, there are scheduling issues. Then last night, I was at the Soda Bay Evacuation Community Meeting at Riviera Heights. We've been planning this for 6 months on a grant that we were awarded over a year ago. We do know that we have to have a countywide evacuation plan, so this is kind of a little pilot program. We did have staff there. We had Director De Leon, Director Turner, and our Chief Climate Resiliency Officer, Terry Logston. We were able to answer a lot of questions. It turned into a different sort of meeting than we had planned, but a lot of people are passionate about this. We had some really great conversations, and staff was on hand to answer questions, which was really important, along with our consultant from Headway. So that is moving along. We got a lot of feedback. The grant is due. Everything must be done by March, so we're on a pretty tight timeline to make sure all that happens. And then tomorrow, we're going to do agenda review today because tomorrow I am at all-day board retreat for North Coast Opportunities in Ukiah. It's an annual board retreat, so I'll be over there. I got to leave first thing in the morning to hit that. And then Thursday, I will be in Sonoma Valley for the annual After the Fire conference, I guess. I'm only able to attend 1 out of the 3 days, but Terry Logston will be attending some of the other meetings. And then Friday, I have the CSAC Women's Leadership meeting right into the air curtain burner. And then the COAD meeting, I'm going to have to miss our evacuation meeting, but I think that might not happen since we just had our meeting last night. And then our CWDG discussion about that grant. And then the Kelseyville Pear Festival 6th Annual Farm to Fork Dinner on Main Street, Kelseyville. That will be starting at 5 o'clock, and then Saturday morning I will be up very early to drive a tractor in the parade. Sunday I'm going to go to the Fiddlers Jam. I haven't been able to go there for the last couple months, but they have some new things that they've moved onto the site, so I'm really excited to see that. And then Monday, meeting with Assistant CAO. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So that is it for my calendar. And then we're going to move into closed session with our extra item, which is litigation or initiation of litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D4 2 potential cases. Thank you for joining us, and that's it for our open session. Thank you.